Though Atlantis slipped beneath the ocean, its story did not end with the flood. From the silence of the deep, echoes remained, whispers of survivors, fragments of wisdom, and ruins that may still lie hidden beneath the waves. These echoes have haunted human imagination ever since, carrying the mystery of a world that refused to be forgotten. Some tales speak of Atlantean survivors who escaped the destruction. In small boats guided by stars and hope, they sailed across vast waters, carrying with them fragments of their knowledge. It is said they reached the shores of Egypt, Greece, and even far-off lands, bringing seeds of wisdom that shaped new civilizations. Legends claim that the secrets of architecture, astronomy, and sacred laws were gifts from these lost wanderers, ensuring Atlantis lived on in spirit. Others believe that the city itself was not destroyed completely, but lies intact beneath the sea. Divers and dreamers throughout history have searched for its towers, convinced that beneath shifting sands and coral, the shining palaces of orichalcum and marble still stand. Some whisper of strange lights flickering deep under the waves, as though the city glows still, guarded by the gods or hidden by enchantment. In myths, Atlantis became more than a place, it became a warning. The story reminded generations that pride and greed can topple even the mightiest kingdoms. To the Greeks, it was a parable of hubris. To others, it was proof that no civilization, however advanced, can escape the balance of nature. Yet for all its warnings, Atlantis also carried hope. The belief that humanity once touched a golden age and may one day do so again. The sea itself seemed to hold the memory. Sailors crossing the Atlantic spoke of vast stretches of water where compasses failed, where waves whispered strangely, where the ocean seemed heavier with secrets. Some said the spirits of Atlanteans still roamed those waters, guiding ships or luring them, depending on the traveler's heart. To sleep by the shore was to dream of glowing towers beneath the tide, voices calling from deep below. And so, the echoes of Atlantis lingered not only in stories, but in human hearts. Philosophers debated its meaning, explorers dreamed of its location, and storytellers wove its memory into tales of longing. Even now, when we close our eyes and think of lost worlds, Atlantis rises first, shining, mysterious, it's unreachable yet familiar. Perhaps it does not matter whether Atlantis was real or allegory. Its power lies in the echo itself, the reminder that greatness is fragile, that beauty can vanish, yet that dreams can outlast even the sea. In those echoes, Atlantis continues to live, not drowned, but carried on the tide of imagination, forever calling to those who dare to listen. The eternal mystery of Atlantis has vanished from the earth, but not from the mind. More than 2,000 years have passed since Plato first spoke of it, yet the lost city still stirs imaginations, inspiring explorers, philosophers, and dreamers alike. Its stones may rest beneath the waves, but its spirit endures, not as ruins we can touch, but as a mystery we cannot let go. For some, Atlantis is remembered as a warning. The gods blessed it with abundance, yet its people let pride and greed consume them. Like a mirror held up to all civilizations, Atlantis reminds us that power without humility leads only to ruin. Each empire that rises has seen itself reflected in Atlantis, wondering if it too might someday sink under the weight of its own arrogance. For others, Atlantis is a promise. They see in its legend not just a fall, but proof that humanity once touched greatness. A society of wisdom, beauty, and harmony, perhaps beyond what we know today. To believe in Atlantis is to believe that such an age might come again. That we carry within us the spark of a golden civilization waiting to be reborn. Across centuries, countless seekers have searched for the island. Some place it in the Mediterranean, others in the Caribbean, or hidden beneath the Atlantic itself. Each expedition carries the same dream, that one day the ocean might reveal its secret, that the shining towers of orichalcum and marble might rise again from the deep. Yet, despite all the searching, Atlantis remains just out of reach, a riddle the sea refuses to answer. And maybe that is the truest power of Atlantis, not that it can be found, but that it cannot. For in its mystery, it lives forever. If Atlantis were uncovered, if its stones were measured and its treasures displayed, it might lose the magic that has kept it alive for so long. Instead, it drifts in the realm of dreams, where every person who hears its story can imagine it anew. A city, shaped not by evidence, but by wonder. As night falls and the world grows quiet, the story of Atlantis continues to whisper. It tells us to cherish wisdom, to walk humbly with the gifts we are given, and to dream of worlds beyond our own. It reminds us that every wave upon the sea carries echoes of lost lands, that every horizon may hide mysteries greater than we can. Imagine, and so, Atlantis endures, not as a ruin swallowed by time, but as a beacon in the imagination. A land that was, or that could have been, or that may yet rise again in our hearts. A city that teaches, warns, and inspires. Story without end, forever shining beneath the waves, forever calling us into wonder. For a long time, the decline of Atlantis unfolded quietly, like cracks spreading beneath a painted wall. But the gods do not sleep forever. In the old tales, when mortals turned from humility to pride, the gods answered with storms, quakes, and fire. And so it was with Atlantis. The Atlanteans, once blessed, had grown arrogant. Their kings ignored the sacred laws. Their armies sought conquest far from their shores. Their hearts, once filled with reverence, now burned with greed. And in the temples, the priests whispered that Poseidon himself had turned his face away. From the island he once loved, it began with tremors beneath the earth. At first they were faint, a shiver that rattled clay pots in the market, a trembling that made the waters of canals ripple without wind. But soon the tremors grew stronger. Walls cracked, pillars groaned, and the people felt unease. The ground that had once carried them so steadily now moved with an unfamiliar anger. Then came the storms. Dark clouds gathered across the horizon, rolling like armies in the sky. Thunder roared, lightning split the heavens, and rain poured with unrelenting force. The seas, once calm, surged with waves higher than ships. Fishermen who had trusted the ocean for generations watched in terror as the waters turned against them. The priests warned that this was the judgment of the gods. Their voices were drowned by the roar of nature. Rivers overflowed, canals burst their banks, and fields that had once yielded endless harvests lay submerged under violent waters. Even the great temple of Poseidon, shining with gold and silver, trembled as if the god's own trident had struck its foundations. The people cried out in fear, but the kings were divided. Some demanded sacrifices. Others called for armies to expand and claim new lands. Few recognized that the true enemy was not beyond their borders, but within their own arrogance. And still, the wrath continued. Fires erupted from the mountains, rivers of flame cutting through forests and villages. Smoke filled the air, darkening the sun. The earth shook so violently that houses collapsed, and statues of the gods fell, shattering into pieces. For the first time in their history, the Atlanteans felt powerless, stripped of the certainty that their greatness would endure forever. It is said that the gods in council decided Atlantis could no longer stand. Once a land of balance and harmony, it had become a kingdom of pride and corruption, so the seas themselves were summoned to wash it away. to return it to the silence from which it had risen. That was the beginning of the end. The wrath of the gods had been unleashed, and no walls, no ships, no treasures could protect Atlantis now. The island that had once gleamed like a jewel was trembling, its fate sealed, its people standing at the edge of doom. The final night of Atlantis, the night that ended Atlantis, began like no other with silence. After days of storms and tremors, the winds fell still, and the sea seemed to hold its breath. Families gathered in their homes, clutching one another, their hearts heavy with dread. High in the citadel, the kings debated, their voices echoing in panic. But even they knew that the end was near. The ground shook again, harder than ever before. Buildings shuddered, walls split apart, and fountains burst as water spilled across the streets. In the distance, mountains groaned like giants, their peaks glowing with fire. The sky, once calm, turned crimson as clouds of smoke and ash spread across the horizon. Then came the sea. A low, thunderous roar rose from beyond the harbors, deeper than any storm. The ocean began to rise, waves swelling higher and higher, their white crests glowing in flashes of lightning. Sailors who had braved countless journeys fell to their knees, realizing that no skill or strength could tame the fury now rushing toward them. The people of Atlantis fled to temples, lifting their arms to the gods in desperate prayer. Mothers clutched their children, elders wept, and priests lit great fires of incense, filling the air with smoke and chants. But the gods remained silent. The trident of Poseidon, carved high above his temple, cracked and fell, a sign that their protector had withdrawn. The waves struck. First they smashed against the outer harbors, tearing ships from their moorings, splintering wood like twigs. Then they surged inward, spilling over the concentric rings of canals. Markets vanished beneath the flood, treasures of gold and orichalcum sinking into the depths. Bridges collapsed, statues toppled, and the great avenues became rivers of chaos. Amid the roaring sea, fire rained from the mountains. Rivers of molten rock slid down the slopes, meeting the surging waters with hissing fury. The earth groaned, splitting open, swallowing houses and fields. It was as though every element of nature had risen against Atlantis's earth: fire, water, and sky. In the final moments, the people clung to one another, their cries lost in the storm. Some tried to flee to the mountains, but the land itself gave way beneath their feet. Others climbed rooftops, only to be swept away by waves taller than towers. The priests sang until the water silenced them, their voices mingling with thunder in a hymn of farewell. And then, in a single, terrible instant, Atlantis was gone. The island that had gleamed with palaces, temples, and gardens slipped beneath the waves, swallowed whole by the sea. All that remained was an endless ocean, its surface calm once more, as if the city had never been. But though the stones sank and the temples shattered, Atlantis was not truly lost. It lived on in memory, in whispers carried by sailors, in dreams, passed from one generation to the next. For even in its final night, Atlantis became eternal, a story that would echo forever. Beyond the shining temples and bustling harbors, Atlantis was guarded by another treasure. Not gold or jewels, but knowledge. The true power of the lost civilization lay in the wisdom of its priests and scholars. These keepers of sacred knowledge were said to hold secrets of the stars, the earth, and the soul itself. To imagine their halls is to picture places where silence hummed with ancient magic, where the air was heavy with incense and mystery. The Atlantean priests were the guardians of law and spirit. Dressed in flowing white robes, they moved through the temples with measured grace, their voices chanting hymns that echoed like waves against stone. Their duty was not only to serve the gods, but to preserve the delicate balance between people, nature, and the divine. They believed knowledge itself was sacred, a flame passed from the gods to mankind, to be protected and never misused. Their libraries, legend says, were filled with scrolls of wisdom and crystalline tablets that shone with inner light. Some spoke of the power of crystals, harnessed for healing and energy, while others described maps of the heavens so detailed that even distant stars were charted. The priests were said to understand the tides of the sea, the movements of the planets, and the cycles of life and death. To them, science and spirituality were not separate paths, but one truth. Flowing together like rivers into the ocean, one of their greatest responsibilities was guiding the kings. Whenever disputes arose, the kings would turn to the priests, who consulted the sacred pillar of laws within Poseidon's temple. The priests ensured justice was upheld, and that the Atlanteans never strayed too far from the path of harmony. Their words carried weight, for they were believed to speak with the wisdom of the gods themselves. But the priests were also healers. They studied herbs, minerals, and sacred sounds, using them to cure sickness and calm troubled minds. Some whispered that they could align the soul with the body through rituals of sound and light, restoring health and balance in ways modern eyes can scarcely imagine. To fall ill in Atlantis was not to fear despair, but to trust in the gentle touch of divine knowledge. Yet even in this world of wisdom, there were shadows. Some stories tell of how the knowledge of Atlantis grew so vast that pride began to creep into the hearts of its people. A few priests warned against this arrogance, reminding the kings that wisdom without humility becomes dangerous. Their warnings echoed like distant thunder, but in the golden age of Atlantis, many ignored them. Still, the image of the Atlantean priest endures, calm, radiant, devoted to truth. To hear of them is to feel the quiet strength of those who stand between man and the mysteries of the universe, holding wisdom like a lantern in the dark. And as the people of Atlantis drifted to sleep under starlit skies, they trusted that these guardians of knowledge watched over them, keeping the balance intact. The decline of Atlantis for generations, Atlantis stood as a beacon of harmony. Its temples glowing in the sun, its harbors alive with ships, its people guided by wisdom and abundance. Yet as many tales remind us, no golden age lasts forever. Slowly, like cracks spreading across polished stone, the decline of Atlantis began. It was not sudden, but subtle, a shadow growing quietly beneath the brilliance of its shining towers. At first, the signs were small. Some kings began to hunger for greater power, dreaming of lands beyond their shores. Their fleets, once used for trade and exploration, sailed outward with conquest in mind. Neighbors who had once welcomed Atlantean ships now feared them, for their arrival no longer brought goods and friendship, but demands and domination. The priests noticed the change before anyone else. Their temples, they saw that offerings to Poseidon grew fewer, prayers were rushed, and the laws once carved into the pillar of orichalcum were ignored. The kings who had once ruled with humility now debated with arrogance, each seeking to prove his strength. Some whispered that the divine blood of the gods within them had thinned, and with it their wisdom. Wealth too began to corrupt. Palaces gleamed brighter than ever, dripping with gold and jewels, but in the streets, greed spread like wildfire. Merchants hoarded treasures, nobles quarreled over luxuries, and envy grew among the people. Where once there had been harmony, now there was division. The balance that had held the city strong began to tilt. The myths tell us that Poseidon, watching from the depths, grew troubled. Atlantis had been his gift, his chosen land, but its people no longer honored the laws he had given them. Instead of harmony, they chose pride. Instead of service, they sought domination. And when a people forget the hands of the gods, even the mightiest walls cannot stand forever. Some sages tried to warn the kings. They spoke of balance breaking, of storms gathering beyond the horizon, of the earth itself preparing to shake. But their words fell upon deaf ears. Power had become more alluring than wisdom, conquest more tempting than peace. Atlantis, once the child of the gods, had begun to walk away from its divine heritage. Still, the city shone in outward splendor. The temples sparkled, the markets bustled, the ships returned with treasures. But beneath the surface, like the quiet shifting of deep waters, something fragile had begun to give way. Pride and greed had taken root. The people no longer noticed that their paradise was crumbling from within. And so, the decline of Atlantis was not a single event, but a long unraveling.
How the people,
Caught up in their wealth and ambition, did not hear the distant thunder. They did not see that their golden city had begun its slow march toward shadow. At the heart of every Atlantean tale lies the divine touch of the gods, for it was they who shaped the island, blessed its people, and guided its destiny. More than a kingdom of men, Atlantis was a land born from the union of heaven and earth. Its rulers descended from the sea god Poseidon himself. To speak of Atlantis without the gods would be to leave out the very soul of its story. Legend tells us that when Poseidon, lord of the seas, first discovered the island, it was untouched by civilization, wild, fertile, and brimming with natural beauty. Forests stretched across the mountains, rivers shimmered with crystal-clear waters, and meadows overflowed with fruits and flowers. But what caught Poseidon's heart was a mortal woman named Cleito, who lived alone upon a hill. She was said to be both gentle and strong, her spirit as pure as the springs that flowed beneath her home. To protect her and the children they would have together, Poseidon raised a mighty citadel around her hill, encircling it with 3 rings of water and 2 rings of land. He shaped the land with his trident, carving deep canals, building high walls, and making the city impregnable. At its center, upon Cleito's hill, stood his sacred temple, crowned with shining metals and precious stones. From this place, the line of Atlantean kings would descend. Cleito bore Poseidon 10 sons, and from them came 10 royal houses. Each son ruled a portion of the island, but the eldest, Atlas, was given the central kingdom, and from his name, the land was forever called Atlantis. These divine kings were said to be taller, nobler, and wiser than ordinary men, their blood carrying both the power of the gods and the resilience of mortals. Under their guidance, the people of Atlantis flourished. In peace and prosperity, the laws they followed were sacred. Etched upon a pillar of orichalcum that stood within Poseidon's temple, these laws bound the kings together, ensuring they ruled not with arrogance, but with fairness and cooperation. They were to gather regularly, consult the gods through rituals, and resolve disputes with justice. For a time, the Atlanteans honored these laws, and their society remained in harmony. Guided by divine wisdom, the people believed their abundance came from Poseidon's blessing, fertile soil that yielded crops without fail, mines that gleamed with metals, forests filled with timber, and seas overflowing with fish. To them, every sunrise was a gift from the gods. Every harvest a reminder of their divine origin. But as the old stories warn, blessings can be fragile. While the gods had given Atlantis greatness, they also demanded humility. For as long as the people remembered their divine heritage, balance endured. Yet if they strayed into arrogance, if they forgot the gods who had made them strong, their golden paradise would begin to crumble. Still, in its early days, Atlantis stood as a shining example of a people blessed by heaven itself, city of gods, and men rising from the sea. Radiant under the watchful eye of Poseidon, the the splendor of the Atlantean city at the heart of the legends. Nothing captured imaginations more than the shining capital of Atlantis itself. To picture this city is to step into a dream where art, architecture, and nature flowed together in harmony. A place so breathtaking that even the gods were said to marvel at its beauty. The city was built in concentric rings, alternating circles of land and water like ripples spreading outward from the heart of a stone dropped into a pond. Bridges crossed over the canals, leading inward toward the royal citadel. Ships glided silently through the waterways, carrying goods from distant lands, their sails glinting in the sunlight. At night, lanterns reflected on the waters, so that the whole city glowed like a jewel floating upon the sea. The outer rings thrived with markets and harbors. Merchants called out from colorful stalls filled with spices, textiles, gems, and treasures. The scent of incense and roasted foods drifted through the air. Musicians played flutes and drums, their songs blending with the sound of laughter and conversation. It was said that no corner of the known world was beyond the reach of Atlantis, and its markets brimmed with wonders from every shore. Moving inward, the city rose in grandeur. Houses gleamed with marble walls, gardens overflowed with fragrant flowers, and fountains sparkled with clear water. Roads were lined with statues of heroes and gods, their forms carved in stone and bronze. Every building was adorned with intricate designs. It's not only for beauty, but as offerings to the divine. At the very heart stood the royal Acropolis, hill crowned with walls of red, white, and black stone. Here lay the Temple of Poseidon, the most magnificent structure of all. Its walls shimmered with silver, its roof blazed with gold, and within it stood a colossal statue of the sea god himself, holding a trident and guiding 6 mighty horses. Around him stood statues of his 10 sons, the first kings of Atlantis, carved with such skill that they seemed almost alive. The temple was more than a monument. It was the soul of the city. Here the kings gathered to consult the laws engraved on the sacred pillar of orichalcum. Here they performed rituals, offering bulls in sacrifice and invoking the gods to bless their people. The air within the temple glowed with incense, music, and the whispers of prayers, as Atlanteans remembered that their greatness flowed from divine origins. But splendor was not confined to temples alone. The city itself was a marvel of engineering. Canals carried fresh water across the land, ships moved easily between sea and harbor, and towers rose like spears of light into the sky. Even nature was woven into the design. Vast gardens, flowing rivers, and lush groves gave the city a living, breathing heart. To hear of Atlantis' capital was to imagine perfection made real, a city where beauty and order walked hand in hand, where men lived not only in wealth, but in harmony with the gods and with nature. It was in every way a paradise shining above the waves. Long before explorers mapped the oceans and sailors charted the stars, there was a story whispered across the ancient world, the story of Atlantis. The earliest voice to bring it forth was the Greek philosopher Plato, nearly 2,400 years ago. In his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, he spoke of a powerful civilization that had vanished beneath the sea. His words painted images of a grand island, blessed by the gods, rich in knowledge, beauty, and abundance, yet doomed by its own pride. For the people of Plato's time, the tale was more than simple entertainment. It was a warning, a mystery. In a dream, could there truly have been a kingdom so splendid, so advanced, that even the gods themselves took notice? And if so, how could such greatness have disappeared, leaving only echoes beneath the waves? Plato described Atlantis as a land larger than Libya and Asia combined, resting beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. There, far in the Atlantic Ocean, lay a realm of golden palaces, glittering temples, and thriving ports. Canals crisscrossed the land, carrying water from the mountains to the sea. Towering walls of red, white, and black stone encircled the royal city, while bridges and gates opened into markets alive with music, trade, and laughter. It was, in every sense, a paradise. But what made the story endure was not just its splendor, but its mystery. Plato claimed the tale came from the Egyptians, who had preserved it for thousands of years in their sacred texts. They said that Atlantis had flourished long ago, some 9,000 years before Plato's own lifetime. That would make it older than any kingdom the Greeks had ever known. Older even than the pyramids of the Nile. Yet as fascinating as the story was, it raised questions that still stir imaginations today. Was Atlantis a real place? Its ruins waiting to be discovered beneath the sea? Or was it an allegory, a parable of hubris and downfall, crafted by Plato to warn against the arrogance of nations? To the dreamer, Atlantis has always been more than a question of fact. It is a place of longing, a vision of perfection, a paradise lost. Imagine the wonder of sailors in ancient times gazing out across endless waters, wondering if beyond the horizon lay a hidden city of gold and wisdom. Imagine the storytellers around firelight, weaving tales of Atlantean kings and shimmering towers, their voices carrying hope, mystery, caution in equal measure. As night fell in ancient Greece, listeners drifted into dreams of this lost land, picturing its canals and palaces glowing under a sun that no longer shines. Even now, as we retell these first whispers of Atlantis, we feel its magic ripple across time. For whether myth or memory, Atlantis lives on, a secret carried by the sea, a mystery that calls us still. The golden age of Atlantis, if the first whispers of Atlantis spoke of its mystery, then the tales of its golden age painted it as a paradise beyond compare. In Plato's vision, Atlantis was not just another kingdom, it was the jewel of the ancient world, a realm blessed by the gods themselves, shining with beauty, wisdom, and abundance. To imagine Atlantis at the height of its glory is to drift into a dream where harmony and prosperity flowed like rivers through every part of life. The heart of the empire lay in its royal city, built in perfect concentric rings of land and water. Each circle was connected by bridges and channels, so ships could sail right into the very heart of the capital. The outer rings bustled with markets filled with spices, jewels, and treasures brought from every corner of the known world. Merchants from distant lands marveled at Atlantean ships, sleek and swift, carrying goods across seas no one else dared to cross. Closer to the center stood palaces and grand houses of marble, every inch shining metals. The Atlanteans were said to have discovered ways of working with orichalcum, a mysterious red gold metal that glowed with brilliance. Their walls gleamed in the sun, their temples sparkled with silver and gold, their gardens overflowed with fruits, flowers, and fountains. It was a city where beauty and function blended seamlessly, where everything seemed touched by divine perfection. At the very heart of the city rose the grand temple of Poseidon, father and protector of Atlantis. Its walls were coated in silver, its pinnacles in gold, and inside stood a towering statue of the sea god, driving 6-winged horses. Around him gathered images of his divine children, the kings who ruled Atlantis in wisdom and unity. To walk into this temple was to step into the very presence of the gods, bathed in incense and sacred light. Yet Atlantis was not great only in wealth and splendor. Strength lay in its people and their harmony with nature. They dug canals that carried fresh water to every field, built harbors that welcomed fleets from afar, and raised towers that reached toward the skies. Their fields were abundant, producing crops year after year, nourished by the fertile soil of their island. Their cities thrived with music, knowledge, and invention. To live in Atlantis during its golden age was to feel secure, blessed, and waste. Surrounded by wonders, but even in its glory, there were whispers of what would come. For the Atlanteans were still human, and in the midst of wealth and power, the seeds of pride sometimes took root. Yet in these early days, balance held strong. The gods watched over them, the people honored the laws, and Atlantis shone like a beacon across the world. To hear these tales was to imagine a place where all human dreams came true, a kingdom of beauty, knowledge, and harmony, where every sunrise promised abundance, and every night ended in peace. A paradise lost, but never forgotten.